And our next storyteller, SylviaBarnes.
I'm going to have to use the podium because I'm an old lady, and after I've heard all these stories, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know if I can stand up much longer. I thought I had a sad story to tell, but you guys are one hell of an act to follow because I kind of look like an amateur compared to what heartbreak you had in your lives. I'm not an exoneree. I've never done a day in prison physically, but I did 20 years in jail mentally because my son Steve was in prison in upstate New York for 20 years for a rape murder he didn't commit. And Saturday was visiting day, and we'd get there at 6:50. We'd leave at 6:15 in the morning, and the closest he was ever to home was 150 miles and 3 hours out and visit. And then when he had to leave, and they shut that prison door, and I'll never forget the sound of the clang when your kid is behind there, and you know he's innocent, and you can hardly do anything, and you just cry half the way home. And Christmas was the worst, you know, because we always had a lot of big family celebrations. We were a Christian family. My kids went to Catholic schools, and Steve was an altar boy and a great big football star, and we got him the best defense attorney, and we thought we did everything we could, and they arrested him 3.5 years after a girl was murdered, and they came back with a guilty verdict, which was the worst day of my life. They had my son locked up, and they had me locked up mentally, because he was the first thing I thought of in the morning and last thing I thought of when I went to bed at night, and how are we going to get him out? We went down every avenue, we did all kinds of appeals, and finally one day in 1994 I was watching Phil Donahue's show, and Barry Shuck was on with 5 or 6 exonerees. He was talking about 3 letters in an alphabet and DNA, and I immediately called the television station, got the address, and Barry had said he taught at Cardozo Law School, and I couldn't wait for the transcript, so I called up and got the address, and I wrote Barry an 18-page letter and cried my heart out, and 6 months later I got a postcard, we'll send the articles, and so this went on for about 2 years, and in 1996 we had DNA testing. An awful dark day when I had to go tell my son that it didn't work, it was inconclusive, there wasn't enough fluid to do the DNA testing. So we just kept on, and we hired private investigators and lawyers, and my son's case was 0018, and it took 20 years to prove his innocence, and it didn't happen until 2008 when technology improved so that they did YSTR testing on him, and his staff attorney had come up to Utica a couple weeks before and told me they had mixed profile, we got to go back to court, and she says, I'll never forget, you just looked at me, it was November, and she said, you mean Steve won't be home for Christmas again? And the next week they did DNA testing, and 8 days later I got the call that it excluded Steve, and she said, are you getting geared up for Christmas? And I said, no, because I hope Steve would be home. And she said, set another place at the table, because your son's being released Tuesday, he'll be home for Thanksgiving. And so, it was all thanks to God and Innocence Project, and I tell everybody this, my rosary beads are on the side of my nightstand, and before I get out of bed every morning I say a rosary of thanksgiving for my son's innocence to be proven, and for all the people in the Innocence Project. And every time I see Barry and Peter, I always thank him, and I say, you gave us back our life. There was 114 exonerees there last night, but they exonerated all of us, because I never seen my kids smile. Steve was convicted 2 weeks before his little brother's graduation from high school. He never went. And my kids used to be crying in their beds, and Mom, this is so unfair, and how are we going to get Steve out? And my son had $10,000 saved for a house, and he gave it to me to get the private investigator. My daughter had $3,000 saved for siding, and he had great siblings, and they never broke our spirit, and we never gave up. And when Steve went to prison, we never sat down to a family dinner, because at our dining room table, my husband on one end and me on the other, and the 2 boys on one side and the 2 girls on the other, and Steve's seat was empty. We couldn't do a family celebration with Steve's seat empty, so we would just have a buffet, and we always made sure that somebody was there on holiday to be with him. And I never put up a Christmas tree for 20 years, and I love Christmas. I used to decorate the house with lights and all. And I would put deer out front because we lived out in the country. And I got the call in '07. It was going to be testing, and they were taking his case. And so I put the lights out a little bit that year, and I still have the piece of paper home. And when I packed away the total lights, I put a note in it, and it was January 8th, 2008. And I said, please, God, as I unpack these Christmas lights next Christmas, let my son be home to put them up. And I just knew as a mother, my son was going to be home. He had life. If DNA didn't work this time, he was going from his cell to grave. And by God, he came home on November 25th. So Steve was so excited. You know, we had a Christmas tree, and we had a Christmas tree, and so he told him about 2 days, Mom, let's get the house decorated for Christmas. So we're down cellar, and I'm unpacking the lights, and he goes out and puts them out, and he comes back in, and I'm just at the fireplace crying. And he goes, Ma, did you get hurt? And I go, no. I go, Steve, read this note. And we just hugged each other and cried. And I said, Steve, I knew you were going to be home this year to put up the lights. And one of Steve's favorite saying now is when he speaks is, every morning is Christmas morning. And it is. I mean, we don't care what we do on holidays. When my son walks in the door, when they release my son, and the judge says, you know, hey, you're free to go, and everybody thinks, hey, your son's free, you know, you got a good life now. But what people don't realize is they broke my heart in a million pieces. And when the judge says, you know, you can go, they think your heart is going to snap right back into places, and it doesn't. It's in a million pieces. And it takes a long time. And when I see my son flying down the road, and he's happy on his Harley, and he's smiling, well, another little piece goes back into place. And then when I think about what they did to us, and what they did to him, and how he missed out on having a family, and a future, and a career, then another piece goes away. And every time he walks in the door, I still, we look at him out in the yard, and I say, you know, is he really Steve out there after 20 years? And so piece by piece, we're getting our life back together again. But I'm awful happy to say that we never gave up. And I'm just one grateful, proud mom. And every day in our life is Christmas morning. Thanks God to the Innocent Project.